evening, everyone, and welcome to Strictly Speaking. Thank you so much for joining us tonight for another episode. Our guest tonight is zooming in from Kentucky, a factory field service engineer with ETC Incorporated, Abby Tutorow. Hi, Abby. How
Hello,
are you?
everybody. It's nice to meet you all.
We're going to go through a couple of questions here, but this is a really casual interview. We're just kind of figuring out what Abby does and really learn about the people behind the business. So, Abby, to begin with, what does it mean to be a factory field service engineer?
Well, I am a factory-based employee of a manufacturer of lighting control equipment. And the field service capacity in which I work for the manufacturer looks a little bit different than a field service capacity for like somebody who sells the equipment out to the industry. My particular job, I perform what we call startup services. It means once the gear is purchased and shipped, I go out, I make sure it's okay. Sometimes I perform low voltage wiring, twisting, screwing down, testing. I do a lot of network engineering, like computer network configuration and troubleshooting. Sometimes lighting systems have to integrate with larger building networks, and sometimes we're just isolated. So there's a lot of network knowledge involved. And also a lot of software programming. I would say that is probably the bulk of my job, is sitting at a computer, pushing buttons and clicking my mouse. And in addition, I do a lot of training, both for end users and owners and for other authorized service providers, technicians.
Okay, great. And I do want to kind of go through to make sure that we're all on the same page here. So when you say the lighting package, the rig, the equipment, what exactly are you out there starting up?
So for me, my particular niche of the job is for permanent installation. So it's a package that's sold and meant to be permanently installed versus like portable equipment that you might set up for a show and tear down and store later. So the process is it gets sold through a distributorship, a representative or a dealer. And then I come in basically after the equipment has been shipped, the electricians install the equipment, doing the high voltage stuff. Along the way, I make sure they're doing their job. I answer any questions, and then I perform my own set of duties. And that's kind of near the end of the job. So the first half is, designing and quoting and selling and shipping and installing on that end. And I come in like halfway to 3/4 of the way through the job and follow it through until it turns over to the owners.
I see. And are you providing training to those owners on how to use that equipment?
Yes, every system we do comes with training, and what that training looks like is very different it's with every system. It might be a lighting control console. It might be an entire building control system, the hallway lights. It might be a stage. So what that training looks like and who the attendees are also matter, right? How are the people interacting with their own building? What is their job purpose and duties? So we may even do the same training on the same equipment, but we may have 3 different trainings for 3 different subsets of jobs in the building.
Yeah, gotcha. Okay, well, great. So take us through now I'm going to preface this. What is a typical day pre-COVID, pre-shutdown? And then what's a typical day nowadays now?
So I actually had a slightly different job pre-COVID than I do post-COVID, or I should say during COVID. Pre-COVID, it was being a field service engineer, which technically I still am. So that was kind of the duties as assigned, but surrounding that was basically traveling about 48 weeks a year. I used to say, I live out on the road somewhere, wherever that is, and I visit my family 8 days a month. So I'm only home on weekends. Usually I didn't have to work weekends unless it's a very long, far away trip, like somewhere Alaska, Hawaii, or somewhere overseas. If it's in the domestic US, typically I'd be home every single weekend. But that's pretty much it, unless I was on vacation. Sorry, my headset was falling off. So that's kind of the way my job used to look. But during COVID, there's a couple of factions. Number one, it was, everybody had to be in isolation first. I also have some pre-existing health conditions. So I'm kind of home permanently for the time being. And my role actually looks a lot different now. I have some similar duties and some are drastically different. I'm doing a lot of what I call field service project management. So I'm kind of a cross between people in the factory being project managers and people in the field installing it. And I kind of, there's a middle space there. I do a lot of like remotely logging into systems and programming with a building that's up and running where I'm connected to a computer. I do a lot of offline programming for software, and I do a whole lot of problem solving, putting out fires and sending emails. And I got to say, I'm not shy, but I am an introvert, a severe introvert at heart, and I'm on the phone all the time, every
Oh,
day. So that's been a huge adjustment for me, something I
gosh.
have never in my life dealt with.
Oh, yeah, I can imagine. Yeah, I mean, and I mean, I'm a lighting designer by trade, by training, and here I am hosting a
Right?
right. What's going on? So I get
Exactly.
it. I
So different.
understand. So I do, you hit a few things, but I want to go back to what you were doing before COVID. You said you were on the road 48 days out of the year.
48 weeks. Yep.
48 weeks. Sorry,
A
48.
lot.
Yeah, out of 52. That's pretty much the entire year.
Most
What's the furthest place you've been? And being located in Kentucky, where are you sent?
the furthest places I've been are Sydney, Australia, and Dubai in the UAE.
Okay.
And the closest I've been is probably within 30 minutes of where I live. So it really varies.
Wow.
Most of my
And
work is primarily domestic, but there
okay.
are several times a year where I might be sent farther away.
And has there been a specific location that you're like, I could move here. This is nice.
Sydney, Australia was definitely one of those places. It was one where I did not have a long time there as far as the job that I was sent there to do. But definitely beautiful and somewhere I want to see more of. Also, I love Las Vegas. I'm not like the casino parts, but like the surrounding area. So that
Sure.
would be another place that it wouldn't hurt my feelings to return to again and again, although that's a lot closer than somewhere on the other side of the world. So
Well, there's certainly a lot of work to be had in Vegas and in your field. So you've talked about what you did during COVID, right now, and pre-COVID. Can you take us a little further back to how
sure.
did you get into this all? How did you start out in lighting, electrician, as in theater?
So I was one of the, I guess you would say, stereotypical, very depressed, very lonely kids who got picked on in high school. My high school and my school years were not pleasant. And my freshman year of high school, my math teacher decided that I needed to be in theater. And I thought that was the most ridiculous thing I'd ever heard. And it was dumb and it was stupid, and just leave me alone and let me wallow in my misery. And she was so persistent that she was calling my parents, telling them to get me involved. She just saw something in me, and she was right. So she dragged me kicking and screaming into high school theater, which turned into college and theme parks, and on from there through other factions of the industry. And I don't really say, I used to say I do theater lighting. That was my job. I do
Mhm.
theater and I do theater lighting. I don't say that anymore. I say I do permanent installations of, or I say I work with lighting controls,
Ah,
because I don't do a lot of theater anymore.
really? So the bulk of your
Very
work,
rarely.
what would you say is the majority of your work right now?
Big places. The majority that I've been doing recently are stadiums, sports stadiums and arenas. I call it sports ball because it's, the irony is I don't like sports ball at all. I'm sorry if I offend anybody who does. Sports puck, no problem. Sports ball, no. But a lot of stadiums, a lot of big stadiums. Malls. Have done a very large mall in Beverly Hills.
Okay.
Um, or some other big ones. Really, the stadiums are the largest overall. So,
So, and the stadiums,
and
I
theme
assume, is
parks.
closest to entertainment
Yeah.
lighting that you get to.
Well, yes and no. So
Oh,
the actually the closest I get is what I call like architainment, right? So like the outside of a building may have color changing LEDs, and we make art happen and pretty stuff. That's really kind of as close as it gets. The stadium stuff is a lot more of turn the hallway lights on, make sure that this suite that people paid a lot of money to rent, can turn on at 100% during the game, but only 50% during this mode, and that kind of thing. So it's a lot more boring. It's what we call architectural lighting.
ah,
There is some kind of effects and fun stuff involved if it's more of like a color changey thing, but that's a little less common. So.
ah. So looking right here, this is a venue, the Ranger Stadium. Yes.
Yes, it is the brand new Globe Life Field.
Awesome. And so the lights that I see, running along, lighting the field themselves, was
Yep.
that your work as well?
That what the programming was our work, yes. And actually the fun fact is this was during COVID and I have not been to the site. All of my work has been remote for this entire job site. There were other people of my counterparts who were on site. This job lasted us, I think, on site from the time we started about 2 years.
Okay.
And I was on the job for just about a year, but that was solely remote. So the lighting that you're seeing, those we call sports lights. So that's the area to light the field, and our equipment controls the sports lights. But in addition to that, we have the concourses and the suites and the offices and the bathrooms, just about anywhere that has a light overhead, interior and exterior, parking garages, the plaza, all of that we control.
And is it just the control that you're working on, or who is creating the design? Who's deciding the look of the actual of the venue?
That's actually a great question. And it's another one that I don't have a straight answer on. Typically, there is either a design firm, an architectural lighting design firm who is hired for that purpose, or a consultancy. It might be an electrical engineer, it might be an architect, it might be the owners themselves, or it might be us working directly with the owners. It's just very dependent on every job, and there's really not a lot of consistency to it. I would say the biggest consistency is I see a lot of architectural design firms with the bigger ones, but that's not always a rule. That's just kind of a sometimes. So.
Yeah, no, I spent many of hours behind an AutoCAD desk drafting up things for a lighting firm to send to ETC to bid. So it's, I can imagine. Well, we have our first question tonight from Samuel. Samuel asks, lighting and lighting systems engineering probably takes you to some spaces within buildings and venues that are very rarely traveled, thinking maintenance tunnels, catwalks, etc. Is that fun for you? Can you tell us about some of the coolest places you've been inside these giant buildings?
Yeah, that's actually a great question. Hi, Samuel. Thanks for that. I'm actually glad you asked. So some odd places that normal people would not be in. I do a lot of what we call IDF and MDF rooms, and a lot of like computer server rooms, which are in buildings that are large. This is a huge security and access issue, right? Nobody in the public is allowed to go in those places, but we have gear that needs to go in there or at least connect to there. So I spend a lot of time there, a lot of locker rooms, and those are highly secure areas, not necessarily with team members in there, but I mean, even without that, it's very secured access. So that's kind of in terms of the stadium stuff. Like in the malls, we can get into the stores and the storage rooms and the shops after they're closed, kind of thing. The rules are a little different depending upon which building. Sometimes there are escorts that you have to key you in, and sometimes it's just kind of free access and they're watching you on the camera. And sometimes it's just, yeah, we trust you, go ahead. But I would say probably I've been to two coolest places that I can recall. On top of the roof of the Mercedes-Benz Stadium in Atlanta, Georgia. And that was awesome. And also the highest peak of the Sydney Opera House, like inside is this catwalk structure. And I got to go up in there when I was in there, and that was really neat. So I think those are my two favorite places.
Wow. Awesome. And I'm trying to get the images up, but Samuel, thank you so much for asking that question. Everyone, don't forget, we do have the Q&A open, ask away. So are you saying you were up in one of these peaks?
Yes, the largest one. Yep.
Wow.
It's the largest one. That's the peak. Yeah. So I guess it's that middle. It's a little hard to tell with the perspective of the pictures, but yeah. So I got to stand there and watch the curvature of the roof as I was standing inside there. So that was really cool.
That's pretty cool. Okay. Well, thank you again, Samuel. So let's keep going, Abby. I got some other questions for you. Okay, working on a job site. So you started off, theater in high school and worked your way through other items, but like, had you ever been on a construction site? And I mean, I suspect that in a lot of this work, you're out there on a construction site. What kind of experience did you pick up, and did you need experience prior to working in this field?
So when I made the transition from doing like temporary lighting shows to the install portion of the industry, if you will, I had never been on a construction site in my life. I didn't know anything. I didn't know any terminology. I didn't understand how the process works. And boy, let me tell you, there's a process. and it differs also between each job, but there is a structure. There's a lot of terminology that's really critical to the construction process as well that I was unfamiliar with all of that. So it was quite an eye opener. I was really lucky in that the very first couple of jobs that I did, even though they were install jobs and construction, they were in theaters. So there was a little bit of a familiar bubble around. And then later I transitioned into non-theater installations and big job sites. And it was a little bit of a culture shock. Luckily, I didn't have any missteps, but I learned as I went. So I'm fortunate in that I was able to kind of ease up into it a little bit.
Okay, awesome. Well, a place that you have worked that could be familiar to many people is amusement parks. And you worked at in Indiana, was it, or Cincinnati,
Kings
Ohio?
Island is Cincinnati. Yep. Yep.
Cincinnati. Yes. So tell us a bit about working in an amusement park. What's that like?
I had a blast working at Kings Island. I applied for the job and it was supposed to be just an over the summer kind of thing. And it ended up that between that and some other work I got in the off season, I just ended up I was in school and I didn't stay in school. I realized I had an opportunity to get into the industry and go. But back to the theme park thing. It was awesome. And I loved it so much that I actually worked double shifts. I would work my show shift for the period that it was. I don't remember how many hours, 6 or 8 hours a day. And then actually I would work a second entirely different job in the evenings where I was an usher clicking a clicker as people came in the door because I wanted the money and I was young and I didn't have anything better to do. And I'm not one of those that like goes out and parties and, I mean, if you do, great, but that's just not me. So I'm like, yeah, work, money, let's do it.
Yeah.
And then afterwards I would hang out with my work family and ride rides and have fun and play in the park.
So were you able to, did you have free access to rides? Is that how that works?
We were allowed to do anything for free whenever we wanted that didn't specifically require an additional fee. So that if there was like, put $2 and throw the 5 balls in the thing, that,
Sure.
not that, but in general, roller coasters, rides, shows, any of that was free access for employees. Now,
That's
we
awesome.
also were gifted a certain number of guest passes. So we couldn't like freely bring in guests, but we had a limited number. I don't remember how many it was, like 4 or 6, where we could give it to a family member or something and they could come and enjoy with or without us. So
Gotcha. And in your time as now with ETC, have you been able to revisit a theme park or an amusement park in this capacity?
I have not been back to that theme park in very many years. I think I was there once after I stopped working for a service call for some rental equipment they were doing. And that was at night and very brief and the park wasn't open. But as far as my job now relating to theme parks, the install portion, yes, I've done a handful of things at Disney. There's a kind of a normal crew of ETC people who work at the parks and they're kind of assigned at that location. But when they need extra help, they bring in extra field service factory people. So I've been to Disney World. I've not done Disneyland. And I'm trying to think of what else. Oh, and Dubai Parks and Resorts as well. That was my UAE trip. I had to go out there. There was a counterpart of mine in London who was doing, the install for the entire theme park or most of it, but he had to go on vacation for a 2-week time period and needed a stand-in while he was gone. So I covered for him.
Gotcha. Awesome.
Yeah, there you go.
There it is. Yep. And so with that, with those lighting projects, those permanent installation lighting projects at theme parks, are they typically, does ETC or any other lighting company, are they overseeing the same thing that you were talking about with like sports ball? Are you doing the concourses? Are you doing the walkways, but also the interior rides?
So I think it differs depending upon which park it is. And I honestly don't, DPR is the one we just saw, Dubai. With DPR, I'm not sure because I was only specifically brought there to work on this one attraction, which was the picture you had up. I don't know what the scope of the other stuff was. I was in the ride. There's a ride, and then there's what you call the area development, which is like the themed entrance to a ride where there's walkways and scenery and stuff that's all thematic and relates to that. So the ride and the area development were the only thing within that one attraction that I did there. However, I do know at Disney World, it's largely everything, you know, not like in a building storage room, we may not be controlling the overhead light, but anything thematic and guest facing. So retail shops, restaurants, the park in general, ride lighting. There's a little bit of division between, they have an entertainment department that does some of the really flashy show stuff, but for the most part, anything that's kind of a static or an artistic building stuff is all us. So.
Awesome. Well, Samuel asked a very specific question, but I really appreciate it because I myself have done this once, and it's really it's kind of scary when you first do it. But Samuel asked, this is somewhat of a silly question, but have you ever accidentally triggered a beam break fire alarm system while working up in the rafters of a theater or a large building?
Samuel, that is a great question. I'm actually glad you asked because I'm going to go off on a tangent after I answer your question. So the answer is yes, but it wasn't in my role now. It was back when I was doing production work, which is temporary setup of shows and events. And we were in a building in Colorado where a firm had rented out a space to have a party or a corporate event. And I was up on a ledge of a wall to place some lights so that we could light the ceiling. And there was a beam there that nobody was aware of, that nobody told me. And I was up there walking, and sure enough, I did it. That's the only time I've ever done it, though. However, interesting fun fact about construction, and this is a serious safety concern, is construction sites, you will hear pretty much on a regular basis the fire alarm being tested. That's just part of the process. So the fire alarm is constantly going off. I mean, not like 8 hours a day, but like, you know, it might be 3 hours today, and then next week it might be 2 hours every day, and then you get a break. So you become really desensitized to that sound, which can be problematic when they really mean it. They have actually a different warning method during the construction process where there's a series of air horn beeps that you get trained on, and that's your emergency cue because the fire alarm system isn't up and running. But it trains you to ignore that. And I happened to be off site for this one job. I was on site for several months, but I was gone that 1 week, and my coworker was there, and he was up in a room working where nobody was and couldn't hardly hear anything. And the fire alarm went off, and he just ignored it because that's what you do. It was real, and they were using it, and there was a fire, and the fireman came into the room, which was like in this weird little half ceiling interstitial space, and said, "You got to get out." He's like, "What are you talking about?" I'm like, "There's a fire." And he walks out, and there's smoke everywhere.
Wow. Well, awesome. Samuel, thanks for that question.
It's a great question, Samuel.
And just for everyone who is wondering, what's a beam break, or what's a beam? Essentially, as you might imagine, it's just a beam of light, usually invisible. You don't really see it, but when the smoke particles kind of passing through it, breaks the beam and sets off the fire alarm. Inside most residential fire alarms in your house, there's a small little beam of light in between. So, yep. So, well, Samuel's going to continue with some questions. Samuel's we got to promote him to panelist or co-host. Sam, keep him coming, man. So, did you ever go down to the secret tunnel hallways underneath Disney World?
I did not. However, Cinderella's castle in Magic Kingdom, we contains a bunch of dimming control and equipment, and I was in there doing a whole lot of work for an entire week. So I was underneath Cinderella's castle. So I was in the dungeon.
Awesome. And for those who may not know, there are a ton of tunnels underneath Disney World that allow cast members to move back and forth between spaces. It's pretty much an underground highway, so to speak. Yeah. All right. Such great questions. Keep them coming. Keep them coming. Let's see. What do I have next? Because
Definitely keep them coming because I can't hold a conversation on my end to save my life.
well, speaking of Disney, I see that you also sent me Disney Cruise Line as one of the things that you've worked on. Well, what did you do with Disney Cruise Lines?
So one of my kind of career goals was to work on a big ship because I'd never been on a big ship ever, and it just sounded cool, and it sounded cool to work on a ship. And I don't mean like, as a career. I mean like if I have to go do a job for a set period of time. So I got the opportunity to do a ship retrofit in dry dock. And what dry dock is every few years they take a big cruise liner. I don't know if smaller ships do this because I don't know anything about them. And the ship goes into a place, and there's a few, around the world, there's several, I guess, where they're set up with these mechanisms where they put the ship into this container or elevator-ish, if you will, prop it up on blocks and drain the water. So it is a dry dock, literally, that's where the term comes from. And a lot of engine and maintenance and outside maintenance and inside maintenance. And typically when ships are brought into dry dock, that's also a time where they want to do everything at once and minimize the ship being out of service. So that might be when they do major renovations inside. So this was several years ago, right about the time that the Disney ship line started doing Star Wars stuff, when Star Wars really became a thing on the ships. I can't remember how many years ago. It's been about 4 or 5 now. So I got to go to the Bahamas, to Freeport, and yep, and it looks just like that, yeah. And spend 2 weeks on the ship, and it sounds really cool, and I was really excited. It's kind of miserable. Most of the time, everything's under construction, including the HVAC. So the rooms are hot and miserable, and they get really cranky about you bringing fans and things in and plugging them in. It's not the most pleasant experience, but it wasn't terrible. I've been told that I was in the Cadillac of dry docks, and some ships and some cruise lines are much, much worse. I will say that because of a delay in some things that I had been doing on the job, I actually was supposed to fly back home out of Freeport. So like a couple days, a day or two before the ship left, I was supposed to go to the airport and fly back home. However, I don't remember if the ship was ready to sail earlier, if we were delayed, but there was a reason where the ship was leaving before my flight. So I sailed home on the ship, which was really awesome.
Awesome.
So I got to stand like at the bow? I don't know, it's a ship. And like right there as the wind was hitting my face, and it was just cool. So we sailed from the Bahamas to Port Canaveral, Florida. I don't remember how long it took, but it was neat.
Awesome. All right. So we've hit Disney, we've hit theme parks. Let's dive into some other things that you do. Can you? So I noticed that you have a certification in ETCP certification. Can you tell us what does that mean, and how does it help someone in your position?
Sure. So ETCP was developed, I can't remember the exact year, pardon me, but it was in the early 2000s, I think, off the top of my head. And basically the entertainment industry, both the rigging side, which is hanging things above people's heads and making sure they don't fall and calculating weights and angles, and also the lighting side, the electrical lighting side, where we're dealing with power that can be very dangerous and kill people, or start fires. We as an industry realized very quickly that if we didn't regulate ourselves, somebody else was going to do it for us. And it might be somebody that's not familiar with our work. We want to be safe, we want to do the right thing, but we don't want somebody imposing rules on us because they don't understand what we do and end up in a situation where we can't do our jobs, right? So committees were put together. And essentially, they came up with a program that is meant to recognize the experts in the industry. So in order to sit for the test, you have to provide work references, document work hours and hours of each kind of task. You have to provide references, and they call and check those references. Many, many qualification points just to sit for the test. And then you take the test, and if you pass, I don't remember the threshold, I think it's above 70%, then you become ETCP certified. I am an ETCP certified electrician. I'm not an ETCP certified rigger. I don't do rigging, nothing above people's heads. That's voodoo to me. I can look at something if it's unsafe and say, yeah, that doesn't look right, but that's about the extent of it. Where that can be helpful to people in our industry, I actually found it a little more helpful when I was on the sales and dealership side, because then I was the one trying to sell equipment, and many consultants, engineering firms, construction companies wanted to see someone, some entity of that company be certified as like the leader of the crew. That may not mean they're present on the job site every day, but they want somebody who is qualified to be involved in the job. So that was what we call a spec point. So the specification on which you provide a quotation and they confirm and purchase. I see it a little less now that I'm factory based, because I'm a manufacturer service. And it doesn't matter what other letters and names are behind my name, because I represent the manufacturer. But one little cool thing that I have had the opportunity to do for the past maybe 10 years is actually be on the board of subject matter experts. And I sit on the development team and I help create the test content, which is really exciting to collaborate with these people who I sit in the room and I feel so woefully inadequate and unsmart. And I know I'm not, but like, totally, guys, I have the biggest case of imposter syndrome you will probably ever see in your life. But it's really cool. And I love being involved to that extent and helping make a difference in the industry.
Awesome. Okay. Well, hey, Sam is throwing them back out there. Keep it coming,
Go,
Sam.
Sam.
All right. As someone who used to travel all over, how do you deal with not being able to have a lot of stuff with you as you travel around? What do you typically bring with you when you travel?
That's it. Sam, you're asking excellent questions. I like your questions. Okay, so what I learned when I first started traveling regularly every week was that it was not smart to take things in and out of my suitcase and have the same things be travel things and home things. So one of the first things I did is I bought 2 sets of everything. Toiletries stay in the suitcase, toiletries stay at home, clothes or suitcase clothes and home clothes. All of that, I have 2 sets, phone chargers, just about anything you can imagine. I have 2 sets of. I have, what I carry with me is if you guys are familiar with the Pelican case, it's like ballistic plastic that has latches on it and is pressurized. So I have a very heavy 75-pound toolbox that I carry to job sites. It's on wheels. And I have I used to have suitcases and they would get destroyed all the time. So I decided, hey, why don't I use a Pelican case for my suitcase? So I have a second Pelican case, which is my suitcase. And then I have a very, very massively packed backpack. And pretty much other than clothes and the big heavy tools, like everything in the kitchen sink is in my backpack. Yeah, hey, nice job. Way to be on the ball there. Yeah, so that's a Pelican case. And then on the end, on the third thumbnail down, there's a retractable handle. So you pull it out and drag it. Where this gets complicated is if I have to have one more bag than the 2 Pelican cases and my backpack. Then I have to get straps and clips and kind of tie 2 together and drag them along. So the logistics of the luggage is not easy at all. But yeah, 2 sets of everything is the key. And I can tell you that there was only one single time ever where I left something behind at a hotel, and it was a small zippered bag of chargers. I just was really good about that. But the other thing that I do that some people don't like to do is I keep everything during the week inside my suitcase. Like I have a dirty clothes bag that I set on the floor beside it. But other than that, I don't put things in drawers. I don't really hang things up. I just need to have a nice collared shirt on. And it doesn't matter if there's a couple of wrinkles. I'm going to be at a construction site and I'm going to sweat it out in 10 minutes anyway. So,
hey, I feel the same way, Abby. Like every time we go on vacation, my wife she's got to move into all the drawers. I'm like,
my husband does that, right?
We're gonna be here in 2 days. Well, let's leave. We're gonna leave. So
small footprint.
Yes,
exactly.
Awesome. Well, Sam, thank you so much again. Hey, you got another 2 minutes to come up with a new question, so we'll give you some time. Don't worry.
Let's go.
Well, when you're out there, when you were traveling, what position on the job site or with the project, who are you interacting with the most? Was it the client, a designer, a GC? Who are you talking to the most?
Mostly the answer to that question is yes.
Okay.
um, so typically, on average, we interface with the electricians above and beyond anybody else because their work directly relates to ours and their progress directly relates to our progress. They have to have the thing hung on the wall and the big wires, the big scary wires run into it before I can do the little tiny not scary wires and program my computer and make things work. That's always problematic because we are the last ones on the job site. And so it's very visible if the job site is running behind that we're the only ones left and why aren't we done? That's a different conversation. So beyond that, so the hierarchy of construction is you have what's called a general contractor who's in charge of the construction site as a whole. And under them are all the different trades, plumbing, mechanical, landscaping, on, and electricians. So they're kind of the boss entity of the site. And sometimes I have direct communication and contact with them. Sometimes I have to go to them primarily. And sometimes I don't ever talk to them or even meet them. I just know somewhere in the background they exist. Typically, if it's a designer or a design team, architect, engineer who has done design work and wants to see how it looks and do the art, that only comes in small spurts and usually at the very end of the job. And the owner interaction really depends. Oftentimes I'm on a site before there are owners, before anybody's in the building, before people have been hired into positions that would use the lighting control. I often, not often, maybe a third of the time, do training to a video camera or an electrician just so they can check off the box and say I've provided training because nobody exists yet.
Wow.
But other times owners are there throughout the whole project and I'm interfacing with them all the time. But I would say primarily it's the electricians, the ECs we call them.
Okay.
And then kind of tangentially, constantly in contact with the factory, my employer, for whatever different needs. So
awesome. All right. Well, your employer, ETC, and tell us what does that even stand for, and what do they do, and give us a little bit of a background with them.
Sure. And I'm going to cheat and check a couple of notes here because I have not been around long enough to know like the expert history. So give me 1 second. I'm scrolling through my notes. Stand by. There we go. Okay. So some of this I know, some of it I don't remember. So Fred and Bill Foster were brothers, Bill and Fred Foster, I should say, because Bill was older. And in 1975, they were students at UW-Madison and decided to build a lighting controller in a garage. I'm skipping some pertinent details, but that's kind of the gist of it. And that took off and they grew. Bill was the first president, and then Fred was the CEO and had been the CEO up until he passed away in February of 2019. And before I say anything else about the history, I got a couple more points on that. Fred was like the most incredible, I'm going to cry, guys, the most incredible, amazing human being I think I've ever met in my life. What an honor to work for this man and his legacy. I'm telling you. Real quick, I used to be an ETC customer, right? Like I used to use their stuff and then I bought their stuff and then I sold their stuff. The reason I'm working at ETC is because of their customer service and Fred's ethos and everybody in the ETC family. So I just had to say that because it's important for me to convey how amazing this place is. They, throughout the years, acquired many companies, and they used to be a theatrical lighting manufacturer. And I say they, I mean we. And that was electronic theater controls. However, over the past decade or so, we have transitioned so much into lighting control instead of theatrical lighting control that we renamed ourselves ETC. So still at the heart, our legacy is ETC for electronic theater controls, but we actually officially changed our name to ETC so we could make sure that incorporated more than just specifically theater. So that's where we are now. Worldwide companies, I think it's either 7 or 9 international offices. I'd have to check my facts. At any given time, although with COVID, I'm not sure because some people have retired and gone on to other places. I think that it's, it waxes and wanes between summertime and winter when we have seasonal employees, but about 1,000 to 1,200 employees worldwide.
Wow. Yeah. And I too cannot speak more about the customer service. I mean, I think it's like you said, at the heart of it it's that they understood that, and ETC understands that the show has to go on. So I can literally be sitting in a theater at 2 a.m. and go pick up my phone and there's somebody there to pick up to walk me through something or literally ship me out the new equipment to take care of it within the next 24 hours. It's crazy. Yeah.
24/7. We're just a phone call away.
It's great. Wow. So, okay. Thank you for that, for a little brief history. Sam, you're a little late. We're going to have to skip your question for now, but you can keep it coming if you want to. So, hey, over here, we're at NC State. When we do shows, we're typically working on a maybe 12, maybe 16 weeks of a production process. We pick up the script, and then 16 weeks later, we're striking the show. What is a project like the Ranger Stadium or the Sydney project or one of these projects last? How long are we talking about?
Every job is different depending upon what task we're doing. Of course, that's a given. My shortest jobs are usually those where I am called out as a factory mentor or teacher to train or assist newer technicians that perform contract field service work for us. And those jobs might be a week or two. That's on the small side. Medium jobs, 3 to 6 months. Large jobs, 1 to 2 years.
Yeah.
So, but sometimes that's every week, but sometimes that's I go for 2 months, I'm away for a week. I go for 2 months, I'm away for a month. It really just depends on how far along the electricians are.
Yeah.
So but like Sydney Opera House, I actually didn't go to do an install there. I was brought in for 2 reasons. There's a dealer there, Jan's Australia, and the Sydney Opera House staff as well. And then there's a third entity, a contractor who provides service and field service for Sydney Opera House. And I actually had 3 different sections of tasks with each of those 3 people. The dealer was to provide some training for newer members and just FaceTime. The service entity was to teach them a specific piece of software that they had been able to learn a little bit, but needed some specifics because they were the one doing field service work for a renovation that the larger space was going through. And then the third one was to provide that same software training to the owners themselves, the team of Sydney Opera House staff. So my work there, all in all, I actually had a sideline trip to New Zealand first that was a different training as well, and that was kind of all bundled into one trip. But really, like my work days, I think there were 4 or 5, and then I had maybe 6. I can't quite remember. So it was like a week of work, and then several days of on either end of a lot of travel. And I had 1 day off where I got to kind of go and play around and do stuff.
Awesome. All right. Well, Sam he's delivered, and deep cut here, deep cut. Incredibly obscure question. Has a client ever needed your help setting up a phone remote feature of ETC theater lighting consoles that use DTMF, dual tone multi-frequency signaling, tones to control the lights? Think old school cordless phone, like from your home, not the ETC app for smartphones. I know this feature was present in my first ETC console, the ETC Element, and I thought it was so fun.
I have never had to help a client do this. However, because it was so cool when the features first became available on the consoles, and this was back when I was a dealer, I wasn't a factory employee, I went out and bought a cordless phone because at that point I hadn't had a phone, I just used my cell phone. I bought a cordless phone and was on a job site for several weeks and bought it specifically to play with because I wanted a remote to walk around with, and also because I just didn't believe it was a thing and it was possible and it was really cool. So I have not had to help a customer with that, but yes, I've used it. Oh,
that's awesome. Yeah, I mean,
great
that
question,
was,
Sam.
I remember when it first came out, it was like, is this really a thing? Oh my gosh,
Yeah.
I don't have to like be tied to a cord or, yeah.
And if it walks away or gets broken, it's easy to replace instead of a dedicated piece of very expensive hardware that you have to make sure stays locked up.
So for those who are wondering, this was essentially a way to control the lighting console, essentially wirelessly, so to speak. Yeah. All right. Let's see here. What is the favorite part of your job, Abby? What's the thing that like you just love?
Oh my gosh, there's so many things that I love about my job. I would say the 3 biggest things are I love to solve problems. Like, I just love a problem and a mystery. I don't want anybody to ever have problems. Please don't misunderstand. But the more ugly and complicated and unsolvable it seems, like, I get a high from that. It's like an adrenaline rush to me. So I'm all over that. Anything that I don't know why this is happening and it's really complicated and nobody has the answer, I'm like, I'm on it. Let me help you figure that out. The second thing is making customers happy, which kind of ties into the problem solving thing. You know, every single system that I do, I feel like it's a holiday, like Christmas or somewhere where Hanukkah, somewhere where you would get gifts. It's exciting to me. I feel like it's mine and I feel ownership in that. And to see the customers get excited about that, whether it's a single lighting fixture or an entire stadium's worth of stuff, it's just amazing. And it really makes it meaningful to what I do. And learning new things, which kind of goes along with the problem solving. Anytime I can learn something new is like super exciting to me. I'm pretty sure, although I'm not diagnosed, that I have ADD. So I have to constantly be stimulated by something. And the more busy I am, even though I may get stressed, the more energized I am and the more I enjoy life. So great questions.
So we've asked and thank you. We've asked what your most exciting or favorite part of the job. Now, I know they're all your babies, every project, but has there been one that has been the most exciting or your favorite project to date?
Oh man. Well, so the ship thing I told you about already, that was kind of a bucket list thing. A stadium job because they're big, and before I had ever done one, I'm like, I want to do something huge. A Disney job because it's the big D, it's the mouse, right? And somewhere far, far, far away in another country. So this sounds a little like I'm bragging, but I've kind of hit all the bucket list points. So I can't think of any other place that I have not yet been to off the top of my head.
Mm-hmm.
However, there's certainly a handful that I would love to return to, Sydney being one of them. Anywhere in a country where I haven't been yet would be another, right? So just anywhere to experience anything new. Singapore and Thailand are on my bucket list. I don't have a reason why, they just sound cool. So, but yeah, so, anywhere far away because I like to travel. So.
Well, Sam suggests space. You should try space. So
Space.
There's that.
Okay, I'll work on that. That sounds exciting. There's a challenge.
So Jessica is asking, do you personally claim the title of artist or do you prefer engineer who does art?
I am in no way, shape, or form an artist. However, if I have to create art, I am competent at it enough that it looks good when needed. I can make beautiful, pretty color changey effects on a building and make it look amazing and present it to an owner and they say, yeah, that's great. That's exactly what we want. Or no, we need to slow this around or make it more blue. But at heart, that's not my passion, right? Yeah. Like even back in theater, I care about connecting the gear together and making it work and pushing go and making the lights happen every time the scene changes. That was my passion. Not so much I need to be blue over here for 5 seconds and then I need some green. I can perform those tasks, but that's not me.
Awesome. Great. All right. Well, being at home or at least unable to go out as much during the last year, have there been any lessons that you think that you've learned over the past year that COVID has taught you that you would continue going forward?
For me, I don't think so because I think that working remotely is always something I do anyway. I mean, just as a nature of my job, maybe I'm not connected to a system remotely, but maybe I'm in one part of the building and need to remote into a different part of the building because I can't reach X, Y, or Z from where I'm at, right? So like those tools were already in place for me. I can't really think of anything else other than, I'm always paranoid about, germs and people being sick and breathing on me. And now everybody's so more aware of that, which I'm thankful for. But what I appreciate most about COVID, the inner introvert of me also appreciates COVID, even though I'm on the phone all the time, because I'm not around people all the time. And I love what I do and I don't mind being around people, but I am an introvert and I don't like crowds, which is funny because I'm in airports all the time.
Right.
But also what I appreciate about COVID is that it has taught people who formerly have not thought it was possible or didn't understand how to cope with working remotely, which has made my life a lot easier with phone calls and webinars, and the willingness to let somebody remote into your machine and give them control of the mouse for 5 minutes to look at something, kind of thing. People now are so much more aware of these tools and how to use them because of COVID, that I hope that you know, I hope it stays. I hope it's a sticking point.
Good. Awesome. All right. Well, Sam's got another follow-up question. How many building exterior light shows have you given as a default example? So, to go a little further, I think I understand you, Sam. As you turn the space over, you've designed this look or this color or these shifts. How many of those do you think are now what those buildings use today because, well, they haven't bothered to change it?
So typically what I'll get, if I get any information at all from what somebody wants, is a description of something. And that's just words. I want to make it flash. I want to make it sparkle. I want to look like flowers in springtime. And that's a little hard to translate into something tangible by bits and bytes and data, right? But I would say the one particular one that comes to mind is the Anaheim Angels baseball stadium, because I got words like that out of the owner. We want these 10 special effects. And these are only white sports lights, mind you. Okay. I want, and not only are they solid all the way around, there's a bank of them here, and then a bank of them over here by first base, and a bank of them over here by third base. So it's not even a wall where I can do like a pixely thing that goes all the way across. And they wanted, what was it? They wanted a wipe, which isn't too hard. And they wanted something to look like the American flag. And they wanted to look like, what do they call it? Excited stars bursting out of the sky. So so that's kind of what I do. And I'm pretty sure that a lot of that content is still there from I don't watch sports ball, but occasionally my husband has it on TV and it kind of looks like what I did, but whatever. And really, that's the only time I've ever created a lot of original content that I can think of off the top of my head without having a base to start from, right?
Yeah.
Like the Beverly Center Mall is another one. It's this giant mall that's, I don't know, several city blocks around, and it's got this wire mesh around the building. And although I didn't create the starting point, I did a lot of editing to it as the design team went through, and I think we had like, hey, yeah, there's the inside of the mall. And actually I have a cool story about one of those rings that you see too. Yeah, so the outside of the mall is the rainbow. So that wraps around the entire building. The building is kind of like a triangle or boomerang shape. And I think we had 30 or 40 different looks. But the fun thing about that was there was a team of like 30 or 40 people trying to agree on what they wanted and how they liked it, how they wanted it to change. So anyway, cool thing real quick. The screen, the top right-hand side picture where there's that wavy copper screen. You see two curves around it, one that's higher than the other. Both of those have lights behind it. Yeah, the arc right there that goes from the escalator to the screen. You got it, exactly. So that goes all the way around from one side of the screen to the other in both of those rows, except the escalator breaks it. Those are kind of a translucent panel. It's actually solid, but it's got like teardrop cutouts.
Oh, wow.
And they have color changing lights behind the panels. This video gets sent to us through the video system, which we don't do, through a video signal, and comes into a processor, controller of mine. So we take that video map, and there's, I don't know, a couple or 300 different controllable points in these two arcs. I can't remember exactly. They're called addresses, if you're familiar with that. We map those pixels to what's going on the video. So when the video is red, where the arcs touch it, the lights turn red. And then when the video is blue, the lights turn blue, which is great until you see the copper and the gray that they keep complaining about. And if you know anything about LED lighting or lighting in general, not a lot you can do to get copper or gray. But other than that, it was really cool. So
awesome. All right. Let's see here. Boom. All right. Well, we are coming up on our time. I do have two more questions that we always want to ask.
Sure.
First off, Abby, has there been an experience or a class or something that is not directly related to what you do that you have found to be invaluable to your career?
That's a really good question. I honestly, the only thing I can think of is many, many years ago, I used to be a volunteer EMT, but that was like right out of high school. And some of the safety skills and the being aware of your surroundings and people, and even though I'm not CPR certified anymore, knowing that and how to use a defibrillator. I've never had to use one on a job site, but I think that that's kind of just an invaluable core knowledge that's really useful and kind of translates anywhere.
Mhm.
And other than that, really just, I think in early college, I took a conflict resolution class. And I also kind of have a thick skin anyway. And that has really helped me a lot translate into a lot of these constructions are very tense and political, and you just got to be real careful what you say, because otherwise, somebody's going to get angry and threaten to sue you. So
Awesome. And then finally, our last question, we end every night with this question. What one piece of advice would you give a person wanting to pursue a career like yours?
this is going to sound a little snarky, but take it in the spirit of it's honest advice. Mouth shut and ears open. If there is one lesson I could have learned, and I don't mean that mean, but if there's one lesson I could have learned early on, is that I have a lot of insecurity, again, imposter syndrome. I always felt like I had to prove myself and let people know how smart I was, and I always had the answer. And I learned over the years that a lot of time it's just best to be quiet and sit there and listen for a while and take it all in. You don't always have to have the answer or have a comment, and learn how to communicate. Primarily, even above and beyond technical skills, we need somebody who can behave themselves in front of a customer, take direction, and communicate. Those are the 3 core job skills. So, of
Awesome. Thank you so much, Abby. And
course.
thank you all for joining us. And Sam, thank you for being our co-host tonight. But Abby, all the best. We wish you health and, good fortune. Thank you again for joining us tonight.
Thank you guys so much for having me. I appreciate it. Take care and stay healthy.
All right. Take care, everyone. See you
Bye.
later.